So welcome all to the Mindfulness Workshop. I'm Vivian Hermes, as Jason mentioned, and I'll be facilitating this session. It's been a real joy to offer these sessions, and I hope that since we're recording them, even if you weren't able to join live, you can go back and watch these and gain benefit from them when you actually have an opportunity. So before we dive into today's topic, I thought we would talk about what mindfulness is again. It's always a good reminder. So mindfulness has a lot of definitions out there. The one that we use at UCLA is paying attention to the present moment experience with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with what is. And we have a lot of different definitions about it out there, kind of depending on the modality that you come into contact with. But the main components of any of those definitions that you're going to come up against is that these 4 bulleted points is that first, there's an intentional awareness that you're going to be applying. So it's either going to be focused, and you sometimes, the traditional way is through breath meditation. So you have this focused anchoring into the breath, or it can be open, where you kind of open up all your senses to whatever is happening. And oftentimes we naturally do that when we're in nature. For example, we just kind of open up our ears, open our sense of smell, and our how we feel against our skin, and how everything is kind of coming together. There's the experiential component, which means that we are always tuning into our senses, and we always try and bring a level of inquisitiveness and curiosity, because that's what mindfulness is about. It's about acknowledging, and I just used a word that we're going to be talking about a little later in defining, but really being with and taking stock of what we're experiencing right in the moment as it's happening. And right in the moment is that last piece, is that all of these things you can actually only do in the present moment. And so these are the 4 parts that you'll always be able to point to in any definition of mindfulness. So what mindfulness is not, and I added this slide because I wanted to be clear about some of the misconceptions there are. So it's not about clearing the mind. One of the things that mindfulness offers is the ability to recognize that the mind can be stable without having to be cleared. So it seems a little bit counterintuitive that you would need a clear mind in order to have a stable mind, but it's not necessary. And that's the most important thing to recognize. Although some people do, when they practice, experience some steadiness to how they're feeling, what they're experiencing in the moment. It's not necessary when we're practicing a mindfulness technique. It's also not about functioning on autopilot. And now we can bring the quality of mindfulness into observing how we move in autopilot, so we can actually bring that same kind of awareness and attention to how we're moving. So right now you can kind of take note of the fact that your eyes blink, for example, on their own, but it's not about being in autopilot and kind of not, again, it's all about bringing the awareness to whatever is happening. It's also not about relaxation. And I think this is a big one, although you can experience relaxation. There's something that's stabilizing and steadying about practicing mindfulness. The creation of that openness and being still is the equivalent of like taking, if you were watching a film with a camera and it was shaking, or if you ever watched a home video of a camera that's shaking, it's so disorienting. But if the camera is still, you can really take in the full image. Same thing with mindfulness. It's an opportunity to sit back and experience what's happening and take stock of what's there. And because it's a matter of taking stock of what's there, sometimes I think that's there is not particularly pleasant. And so that's why I want to kind of move away from the definition of mindfulness about being about relax and a clear mind and all of these kind of things that I think a lot of people find to be barriers to even starting their practice. So today's topic is we're going to be talking about emotions and how to be with our emotions as they come up. Emotions are a natural part of our experience as humans. I like to say we come uploaded with a full pack. This is an extension of a quote from one of the teachers that I can't remember who it was, but who said, until how did he say it? Okay, so until we have how did he say it? Oh, I'm blanking out on the quote, but it was something to the effect of like, we come with this operating system, this human 1.0 operating system, and until it gets upgraded so that we can manage our emotions, until we get upgraded to human 2.0, we have mindfulness as a backend. So I want us to, if there's any takeaways from today's experience, I want to take away that emotions have a purpose to prompt us to move or do something to honor ourselves. And they also have corresponding physical sensations. And that's what we're going to be working with today. And obviously, when emotions arise, they actually lead to observable behaviors. We see it in the way we carry our body. We see it in our facial expressions. You probably just saw it when I was kind of struggling for that quote in my mind. So you can see emotions and observe them manifesting in the body. How much more interesting would it get if we can tap into that and stay aware of how we're experiencing the emotion as it's happening, instead of allowing it to just engulf us and basically take control of how we present to ourselves and what we think about ourselves and how we present to others. I wanted to share this. It's the Bodily Map of Emotions. It's out of a 2013 study. And that top row are emotions. They're called the primary emotions. The bottom row is touching on some of the secondary emotions that are categorized as secondary emotions. And what they did was they found that people experience emotions across cultures in very similar ways. And they gave people these outlines of a person and said, where do you feel, when you feel anger, where do you experience it? If you feel fear, where do you experience it? Disgust, happiness, sadness, surprise. And what areas, for those areas where you're very activated, put an X, highlighted in red, yellow, orange, red, orange, yellow, yellow being very activated. And those areas that you feel become deactivated, that means they get very weak or get downgraded, mark them as blue. And neutral was going to be just black, just leave it blank. And as you can see, that happiness, for example, activates, people were reporting across cultures. This was done in Western Europe and East Asia to account for different cultural expressions, that happiness is felt all across the body. There isn't like a place where people don't feel when they experience happiness. And anger is very much an upper body experience. The lower body is pretty neutral, which makes sense because we have expressions in our face and probably our hands, and our upper body stiffens. But let's compare that, for example, anger, and how similar it is to pride, or compare happiness to how similar it is to the secondary emotion of love. So I love this grid, or anxiety with fear, right? So I love seeing the fullness of this because it speaks to the universality of how we experience emotions. And when we bring in mindfulness, we also create a space for emotional agility. Now, a lot of times, I will say, I'm so angry, right? We don't say, oh, I'm experiencing anger. And if you can just stop and say those two sentences to yourself, notice how they feel, and just reflecting on those. I'm so angry versus I'm experiencing anger. There's a piece that's it's making it an object of your observation and not a quality that you possess. So this helps us in not staying too rigid with our feelings and emotions. And we want to maintain that kind of flexibility around our emotions, because really they are very similar to weather patterns. They move in, they spend some time in us, then they move out. And it's also important in that the mind has what neuroscientists have come to describe as the default mode network. And that's a really neutral way of what the actual finding behind it is. And that is that our mind has a negativity bias. This comes from evolution. We wouldn't survive unless we were able to scan our environment for dangers, threats, anything that would put us in put this life in jeopardy. So it's really important to provide a balance to that. You don't want to create too much of a counterbalance, because focusing only on the positive, it kind of cuts out a huge swath of our human experience and doesn't allow us to grow. A lot of times we learn from our mistakes, we learn from our pains. It's just about how we get to the other side and bounce back from it. The other piece is that I invite you to consider that emotions are data points and not directives. Now, you can recognize that you've experienced anger, upset, even blinded rage without having to act on it. These are emotions that come up inside of us as human beings. Doesn't mean we have to act on it. But where do we create that splice in that experience of anger or rage where we can kind of create a wedge so that we can not act on it? And that's the question here. Additionally, studies show that suppressing or ignoring emotions actually makes those emotions stronger. Again, you can imagine you're kind of creating a pressure cooker effect when you don't allow your emotions to come out and express. Additionally, by labeling our feelings accurately, we can respond and not be reactive, because we can meet that emotion as it's happening, maybe in real time or very soon afterwards, and tend to ourselves and whatever we need in the moment, so that we don't end up taking it out on ourselves or on others. And finally, I want to put forth the proposal that emotions are extremely valuable, including those ones that are unpleasant, and that they keep us connected with each other. It's how we are able to relate to others. If we didn't have our own suffering or pain, how would we, in a very real way, be able to relate to others' losses, suffering, and pain? So in that humanness, in that building of relationships, emotions are particularly valuable. So with that, I just thought we would take a practice moment. This is actually a really nice adjuvant, like supportive practice to the larger practice that we're going to do together. And it's called STOP. If you can see, it stands for stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. And this one you can bring into your day just as your day is going by. Whatever you're doing, you can always stop what you're doing, especially if you feel like, ooh, I'm out of sorts, I'm out of my neutral zone. And then after that, you just take a breath. And you can take a couple of breaths, depending on how much you need. And then begin to observe, notice where you're feeling it, how it's showing up, what sort of sensations are being experienced. And then the proceed is just going back to whatever activity you were doing. And a lot of times we do this, we don't do it in this very conscious way, but we do it, take a deep sigh if we're exasperated, right? So we're taking that deep breath, but we're not doing that O part of observing, okay, where is this happening? Can I take another deep breath and allow it to kind of go from a 8 down to a 7, maybe even down to a 6. So I invite you now to practice with me. I just gave you a lot of information. So stop, take a breath, Take another breath if you need it. Observe. So noticing where you're feeling it. Is it in the shoulders, in the back, in the throat, in the face, in the chest, in the belly, hands? Sometimes we can stiffen our hands and then proceed. Now let's do it one more time like we would in a normal conversation. So as I'm talking, just stop listening to me, but take a breath, observe what's happening, and come back to the discussion. So it can be as quick as 2-3 seconds. And it's a practice you can do whether you're in a meeting, if you're in a conversation. It's not something that anybody has to notice, but you're giving yourself an actual mindful moment. The practice we're actually going to do that has another acronym, and it's RAIN, and that stands for recognize, allow, investigate. And the N has come to mean many different things. So I just decided to include them all for the sake of, having full coverage. And that's nurture, notice, and not identify. And we're going to take each one and define them before we actually start the practice. So recognize is there an emotion here right now? Is there something coming up for me? Am I out of my neutral zone? There might be more than one. So again, coming back to that idea that's supported by the science, which says label it, because if you can label it, you're bringing your prefrontal cortex online, your rational mind online. Label the emotion. And then you take them one at a time. So we're going to recognize one, then we're going to move on to A, which is allow. And in this space, the question is it safe to feel this emotion right now? Because it's not always ideal. An emotion might be coming up in the midst of a meeting, right? And you might not feel safe to tend to it in the moment. And if the answer is no, so you always ask yourself, is it safe for me to feel this emotion right now? If the answer is yes, then you move on to the next step, which is investigate, which we'll get to. If the answer is no, the invitation and the exploration is there another emotion here underlying that I can tend to? Is that one safe to feel? So for example, let's say you're in a meeting and you get angry. You've experienced some level of anger. Is it safe to feel this emotion right now? Maybe the answer is no, because you're feeling so angry. It's an 8 or a 9, and it's a little bit too much. So you say, okay, is there an emotion underneath here, underlying this one? Well, maybe it's disappointment at what has just been said, or maybe it's confusion as to how the meeting is being conducted. So maybe there's anger at the top. Remember, we were talking about that there's these secondary emotions as well. But is there another one there? Is there disappointment? Is there sadness? Is there confusion? You try and find one that you come back to that first question. Is it safe to feel this sadness, or is whatever you're identifying, this confusion, until you get to a yes? And once you get to a yes, you start exploring that one, the safe one, with the next step, which is I, to investigate. And investigate is that same thing as the O in the stop practice, which is observe. But here in the RAIN acronym, it's called investigate. So where am I feeling this emotion in my body? How is it coming up right now? And some of the possibilities are, you might feel perspiration, you might feel hot, you might feel cold, you might feel some movement happening, areas of tension, areas of softness. You might be sensing the valence of it. It might feel pleasant, unpleasant, neither, a mixture of both, of going in and out. The I is where all of the work is. all of the mindful work happens with that I, because as you investigate and you kind of start to peel the layers of how this emotion is expressing in you, going back to those heat maps of the body, each of us has a way that we experience anger. And the more you get to know it, the more you start mapping your brain. Oh, when these different physical sensations come up, bring mindfulness on, switch that mindfulness switch on. So the more you do it, the more it builds on itself. And you start getting into more subtler and subtler physical sensations for those emotions, to which point you're not reacting, right? You're starting to catch it earlier and earlier because you're sensing into the feelings before they erupt. And you can actually just be responsive, whether it means removing yourself from the situation or tending to your emotions in real time. And now we come to the N, which is actually oftentimes the one that people find most difficult to wrap their mind around. And I think that's the reason why different teachers have incorporated all these different ways to define it. But really, it's about, am I caught in this emotion still? Is it still an 8 after I've given all this attention and investigation to it? Is there any space around the feeling? Or is it still kind of taking over my whole body? Can I bring some kindness and tenderness to it? Can I recognize that this emotion is just part of me being my human self? It's just part of this human experience. So that's the N, and we're going to do a practice with all of them. One thing I should say is that due to our time constraints together, I'm going to take us step by step through them as a guided practice. But when you do it on your own, and if you choose to do it on your own, I hope you experiment with it. You can spend as much time on each step as you need to. You don't have to move through them in the way and at the pacing that we're going to go through it. This is just for me to help you learn the practice and hopefully, press pause at each step if you do it on your own. So our practice today is rain with multiple N's and to the 3rd degree. Oops, and let's go back, sorry. So I just invite you, we'll start with about 5 minutes of settling and then we'll move into the rain practice. So I invite you to stretch up and settle in. And let's just begin with the 3 centers practice, where we're going to first check in to our body and notice how the body feels right now. And as you do this practice, your eyes can be open or closed or anything in between. If your eyes remain open, I just invite you to maintain a really soft gaze, maybe a couple of feet in front of you. And that's just to allow yourself to not have full distraction in your visual field. You can take a couple of deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. Maybe even sighing on the exhale if that feels right. Beginning to open your awareness to how the body feels right now. So the mind might be jumping around to different parts of the body, maybe to the unpleasant parts. And you can experiment with letting the mind do its thing to wherever it wants to go, and then maybe offsetting wherever that is to open up to areas that might be pleasant or neutral. You might want to move around, or you might want to just offer your attention to one area of the body, like the feet on the ground, the hands, maybe the gentle rocking of the breath as it comes in and out. And the mind might wander into thoughts, into feelings. But in this moment, giving your exquisite attention to your body, gently inviting that attention back. And these periods of silence are just to allow you to have some time to explore whatever prompt I'm offering and play with it, experiment with it. How's my body doing? And now, if it feels comfortable, I invite you to move your intention to your mind and notice, what sort of mind am I working with right now? Is it feeling sluggish? Is it very alert? Is it chewing on some thoughts that it's been on all day? Or is it curious? What's the state of my mind right now? Recognizing that the perspective of mindfulness, there is no right or wrong mind state. There's just the mind state that's here. And now we're going to shift gears into our feelings and emotions, dropping your attention to your chest or heart area, because that's where we often experience emotions. Noticing if there are any feelings here. We're going to start with that R in RAIN of recognize. Is there an emotion or more than one emotion here right now? You can label it if you can. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes it's, we know that there's a physical sensation there and it's emotional, but it's really hard to label, and that's okay, because we can go to I. We can always investigate that. So it's okay. Just going to take them one at a time. If you can recognize an emotion, check in to see if it can be allowed. So going to that A in rain, can I allow this emotion to be here? Is it safe to feel this feeling right now? And if it doesn't feel safe for whatever reason, I invite you to check in and see on a scale of 1 to 10 how intense that emotion is. 10 being unbearable, jump out of your seat. 1 being just there. And if it's not feeling safe to feel this particular emotion, notice if there's an underlying emotion with it, underneath it. Does this one feel safe? Again, the answer can be either yes or no, and you keep doing that exploration under allow until you find one that comes up with a yes, at which point you move into the I to investigate. So whenever you're ready, beginning to explore in that investigation, where am I feeling this feeling? It could be different places in the body. Some areas that might feel strong, but there might be secondary areas where it's more faint, but still noticeable. How is it showing up? Is it showing up as a tension, some sort of movement? Is there a temperature? Can you name whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, neither of those things, coming in and out of pleasant and unpleasant? Getting really curious about this emotion and all of its qualities as you're feeling them right now. And if it's challenging in any way, taking a deep breath, maybe coming back to the breathing for a while, and then revisiting the investigation. And maybe you've done a whole pass through of this particular emotion. You've investigated it. Open yourself up a little more and ask, is there anything else? Are there any other physical sensations here that I should notice? Remembering to breathe. The mind might find other emotions, and that's fine too. We'll do another pass through the practice, but let's shift gears into the N in the acronym. And to do that, let's begin to notice how strong the emotion still is. Has it stayed the same? Is it stronger? Is it weaker? It can be any of those three things. Remembering that this is about taking stock of our experience, not judging it. You can even go back to the scale of 1 to 10 and notice, did it move up or down on the scale or stay the same? Another exploration you might want to make with the N is noticing, am I still caught in this emotion? Or have I jiggled it a little bit? Is there space around it? Again, the answer could be yes or no. And lastly, checking in to see if you can bring any tenderness or kindness to this emotion, or recognize that this is just part of being human. And finally, checking in to see if there were any kind words. Is what do I need in this moment? Can I offer myself up some kindness? What would support me right now? Can I offer it to myself? Can I own this emotion without it owning me? Can I let it pass like clouds in the sky? So, taking a moment to offer some gratitude to yourself, because this practice is actually not a particularly easy practice. It's pretty challenging, and you could have been doing anything else, but you chose to take this pause, take this break, build this muscle. Now, coming back to noticing the body, how it feels, and taking a deep breath and exhaling, taking another very deep breath and doing a long exhale out, becoming aware of the space that you're in and your posture just as it is. And gently fluttering your eyes if they're closed, allowing the light to peer in. So that is the rain practice. It's a little longer than the stop practice, but I hope that you will make use of both of them and that you can use them in the moment. You can use stop in the moment. You can actually even use rain in the moment. You can also use it on pleasant emotion. So a lot of times, a lot of these antidotes are for dealing with the unpleasantness. And that's because our mind is always trying to get rid of um, negative stuff, things that feel unpleasant. And so it's kind of low hanging fruit for us to glom onto. But know that you can apply this to really pleasant, positive emotions, doing that investigation when it's happening, when you're feeling it and a really strong positive emotion, or even a subtle positive emotion actually makes it grow. So you can enhance a positive emotion by practicing rain, and you can kind of build more capacity when you're working with more difficult emotions. So just wanted to make that note that you can use it with both, and they build different emotional skills. So I just wanted to give some time if there are any questions about this practice. I want you to stay gentle with yourself, because I know it just feels like, oh, I just did something with my brain, with my feelings, and you might not feel the true effect, the full effect of it, but it can be a little disorienting. So if you start experiencing anything challenging, to really come back to that sense of, what do I need in this moment? Can I offer it to myself? If it's kindness, if it's a healthy, delicious snack, if it's just closing your eyes, or just taking a few deep breaths, like in the stop practice, just offering that to yourself as you go about the rest of your day. So, as Jason noted, I'm a facilitator through the UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center. We offer all sorts of offerings, from classes and workshops to days of mindfulness, like a full day of mindfulness, usually ranging on specific topics. So I invite you to check out the website. We also have free audio in, I don't even know how many different languages. So visit our website for those audio recordings in various languages. They're all guided meditations of different lengths covering different topics. And we also have the UCLA Mindful app that also has those recordings on the app, and it's also at no cost. So I invite you to explore those. And I just wanted to give some time at the end for any questions, reports, or takeaways anyone wants to share, just in case.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So mindfulness is different than doing, like, for example, I'm on that app that does meditation. So the meditation, I guess, is intended to calm you and clear your mind. And this is something different, right? As far as like being specific, like stop, taking care of yourself in that moment and in the brain. Is that
So
correct?
I would say that mindfulness is a type of meditation. So there's very many different ways of practicing, and this is just one way. A lot of what we teach, when we teach breathing practice or walking meditation, movement practices, mindful movement practices, the point isn't to get people to be really good breath followers or like really acute awareness of their feet. It's that we want to build that sensorial awareness in the body so that they can, stay aware as they're moving through their daily life. We just do this in this kind of formal way so that hopefully it'll pass through into their daily life. When we do these sort of shorter practice periods of practicing stop, it actually brings in the mindfulness into your day, so that I liken it to like the glycemic index, and that's like your blood sugar level. Like you never want it to drop too low. You also don't want your mindfulness to drop too low over the course of the day. So if you're only applying mindfulness when you're doing like a formal meditation, your mindfulness factor is like pretty low and you're having to bring it back up. Whereas if you can keep it across your day doing different smaller practices, there's not that deep dip in your awareness, and you can kind of hit those insights and rise above in the experience and kind of move forward in your practice more quickly. Is that helpful?
Yes. Can you put that previous slide up one more time so I
For
can write
sure.
that, if you don't mind? I want to make sure to write that down.
Yes. And yeah, it's uclahealth.org/MARC for Mindful Awareness Research Center. That's the main site. I provide the audio one, which is uclahealth.org/MARC/AUDIO for audio on the slide itself, just to have direct links.
Okay, and then the other one, the awareness is without the audio. I can.
Yeah, exactly.
Ramona, I sent these out a couple of weeks ago in one of the emails. I'll send them out again when I send out my Monday, letting everybody know what's going on for the week. Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank
No problem.
you.
So how did you all find the I part, the investigate part, or the N part? Like I said, it's the more challenging of the two, of the four.
I like the stop part, especially when you're feeling that the example that you gave is perfect. Like when stuff starts coming up and you can't figure it out, but you know you have to assess whether how you feel about discussing it. So I really enjoyed that stop part.
Mhm.
And the rain part, I like also. That's why I wanted to explore it more.
Mhm.
I think to me, the big question at the end was, what is this emotion? How can you take care of yourself? And I was stuck there. Like, what could I do that's nice to take care of myself? I felt like I got stuck right there. I don't know.
What can I offer myself?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is common because a lot of times, how are we, we don't take the time to say, okay, what would nourish me in this moment? What is it that I need in this moment that's not being met? And I think that's a really great exploit. I mean, it's just another piece of information of like, I need to explore that. What feels good? And actually making a list of those things that feel good. I think we talked about it in the mindful eating segment of like, what can we do other than kind of that in reflexive, reaching for unhealthy foods, making a list of nourishing activities, things that support how me in the moment, it could be as simple as like petting your dog, you know, a quick phone call with a friend or someone you love, right? Having just hearing their voice and taking in that they're still here and you're still here and you can reach out. Those simple joys. And for me, it's when I walk my dog in the morning, I have rose bushes and they're not in bloom all year long, right? They go through cycles and right now they happen to be in bloom. And the smell of them just always hits me and I have to stop. I do practice. I have to stop, and take in the smells of these rose bushes and enjoy them. So yeah, it's just about noticing what things, and it's going to be different for each of us. So I'm just giving you examples, but it's going to be different for each of us of what we find. But what we don't want to do is just be reactive to the things that we've gone to that numb us, like going to our our smartphones or turning on a mindless TV show, or you know what I mean. We want to stay present for our lives. We want to stay present for this body and all the things that it's communicating all the time. A lot of times pain starts, pain as signal. We talked about pain in previous sessions too. It starts off as like, again, these are data points and we kind of push it off. We don't think about, oh, like maybe it's asking me to respond in a different way to my experience. And when we kind of avoid it, it only amplifies and gets stronger and stronger, and maybe injuries become more protracted. So, I would say just it's really important to find that list of nourishing things. And it doesn't have to be that many. It could be journaling. Some people find that really supportive. And you can do that writing it down, or you can make that as a positive use of the smartphone by putting it in a note and keeping track of it. So gratitude journal, there's just so many options out there. Just encourage you to explore and see what works for you. Because we don't know. A lot of times, like, oh, that's not for me. I don't want to do gratitude journaling. But it might be just the antidote for what we're doing, what we're experiencing in the moment. It's just staying curious.
Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. Jason, I just wanted to touch base with you. I don't know if there are any other questions.
No, thank you very much. Thank you to those who attended. Once again, I'll put this up on the wellness website, the YouTube site. Like I said, there was a lot of stuff going on campus today, so that's why the numbers are a little bit lower. But thank you very much, Vivian. Really appreciate it. This will be helpful with my daughter. My daughter's a very emotional person, and I'm gonna play this for her so she can. As my wife always says, she's got big emotions.
And that's kind of good. Like, it's good that it's moving through her, right? You don't want her to bottle it up, right?
Right.
So, but if she can tend to them, what a bigger experience that's going to be, and more fruitful.
Absolutely. So, but thank you very much once again. And our next one is May 4th. And what are we going to be doing? What's the topic for that one?
Oh my gosh.
Do we know? Do we remember? I can't remember offhand.
I removed that slide from the presentation.
It's okay. No worries. Just shoot me an email, and when next week when I send it out, I'll send it out. And if there's anything that people need to bring or whatever.
It's the second to last one, right?
I believe so. Yes.
If it's the second to last one, we're going to be doing feel good. So we're going to be propping up the positive emotions, I believe.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay. Well, shoot me an email and we'll go from there. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it. Vivian, thank you once again. Thank you for all you're doing for us.
Of course. Take care, all. Be safe. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.